Hello. On today's video, I will be showing you a portable Bluetooth keyboard that I have been using for quite a while, share with you my impressions, and of course tell you more about my expectations regarding the product. This keyboard, that is the TR-MWK, retails at around $12 or €10. I think it's quite a good keyboard. It also has certain shortcomings. But let me tell you, of course, first what is its main purpose. You may have found generally with smart TVs that you need to have a keyboard in order to enter data quickly and navigate certain screens. And I think this is still a major advantage to use a dedicated keyboard rather than rely on the remote control. Also, this keyboard can be used with Windows devices, Mac OS, and Android devices. Other, not only smart TVs. And I think this set of features is quite nice. And let me mention a bit about how the keyboard looks, feels, and what kind of functionality it has. First of all, as you can see, it offers quite a lot of keys. It also features the typical function keys that are very useful when working in Windows or Linux systems. It also has certain shortcuts that I think are quite good. For instance, you can see over here a shortcut for the command Ctrl-Alt-Delete function that can be accessed by first pressing the function key on the left and then pressing enter, which is quite a good shortcut. I haven't seen many keyboards to feature such functionality. It also has your typical trackpad area. I think it's quite nice. I don't have many complaints about it. And it also features your typical laser light that I think you can quite guess at over here on this side. So let me mention something more about my experience with the keyboard and turn it on. Alright, so first of all, you can notice over here the power on off switch, the micro USB connector. This may be a certain issue because it has an internal rechargeable battery. On the other side, you don't have the typical more modern connector that you can see right now with USB-C, for instance, which could also charge it perhaps quicker. And you see over here the place where you put safely your USB Bluetooth transmitter. Unfortunately, one of my common gripes I have with many keyboards is that unfortunately you cannot use it as such as a Bluetooth or any sort of other wireless standard keyboard. You still have to use this additional transmitter. This is one of the complaints I have with many USB devices. Unfortunately, I'm not entirely sure if a better implementation could be done just by relying on Bluetooth communication. The potential answer is yes. However, I have not seen until now such a product. Alright, you can also see over here your typical cursor keys and the left and right mouse buttons. The key feels is quite nice, although the upper surface is clearly rubberized. The part under the keyboard uses a metallic dome, and I think this gives it a very nice tactile feedback, so you know very well what kind of key you pressed, and when it makes it sends your keys, it makes the necessary contact. So I think this one is a very good keyboard in this respect. You also have some status lights that show you when you should be charging the keyboard, when you have pressed it and it noticed that the key was pressed. And I think there is another key over here, another light that could be shown when you are in caps lock mode. And I think this just about covers it, and of course the key for turning on the laser pointer. Alright, so let me start this keyboard. Alright, as you can see right now, it's in the communication mode. It has not connected with anything because the key is not plugged, the USB key. On the other side, I can show you quite well part of it, of its functionality, and also mention some of the problems I encountered with it. In general, just about any device that I have been using with your typical computer capability, which means Mac OS, Windows and Linux systems, seem to have no problem in using all the keys. And also they have quite a short delay, so it's quite a good keyboard when you think about everything else. Okay, this is the key, and as you noticed, there is the light that comes from the laser pointer, and this is the light. Oh, sorry, this was the light button. As you can see, I think it's quite nicely and nicely lit, so I think it's quite good to use in darker environments. Unfortunately, my only concern I had with it, but it may not necessarily be due to the keyboard, was that with certain Samsung smart TVs, it seems that certain keys are not properly interpreted, and this means that instead of I don't know, typing a Y, you get a different letter. But this seems to happen only on Samsung OS Tizen, if I remember correctly, which is closer to Android but is not really Android. So I cannot have too much complaint about that, but I mention it since it was necessary. Over here you see the label. It's your typical USB device. You will not have too much of a power consumption when you plug it in. And of course, I think that each and every time you don't need the keyboard, you can clearly turn it off. Alright, what was my experience in using it, the typing experience? Well, first of all, it's quite a small keyboard, so don't expect miracles in terms of your comfort or your long-term comfort. However, for short typing sessions, I think it's quite nice. It's well built. Of course, it's a plastic case, don't expect too much. On the other side, it's quite sturdy, at least compared with other keyboards I have seen. The key press feels nice. I find the shortcuts to be useful, the meta key, the backspace, especially the function keys rows, as mentioned, I think are quite nice. The trackpad feels all right. It's not overly flimsy. It's quite sensitive enough, so I don't see a problem in using it for quite a while. Of course, it's not as large as in other keyboards, but I think it's enough in order to control the cursor from time to time. In general, if you are going to require more pointer input on your system, I don't think this solution is going to suit you, but for occasional data entry that you have to use such cursor movements, I think it's quite nice. The clickable cursor keys are nice. Also, the separate clickable buttons for the trackpad, and I think this is a nice feature, even if sometimes you may consider it quite pointless, because there are some keypads that are already quite well in sensing a left or a right press, because you can also use it as such, and you can have much more capability in, for instance, dragging and dropping coordination. And I think this one is for scrolling, and as far as I can tell, in some operating systems it works quite fine. In others, I think there might be some configuration that has to be used. In general, in Windows and macOS, I haven't seen any problem in working with scrolling. In Linux, I have not tested enough to know if all systems exhibit the same behavior. But as it seems until now, I think that it's all right. The endurance, well, it depends on how much you use it. I have to say that the battery holds a charge quite well if the keyboard is not used for I think more than 1 month, which is entirely enough for most purposes. Unfortunately, as you're going to, of course, use the keyboard much more, and if you're going to enjoy it, you're going to notice that from time to time you have to recharge the battery. I have never recharged it any sooner than 2 weeks, so it has quite good battery capacity, and it's not using too much. On the other side, I'm not expecting, if you're going to use all these features, and especially if you're going to use the keyboard light, to last as long. In general, in my use scenarios, it was enough to work with the keyboard. I did not have to use the keyboard light. But I think it's a good feature to have. What else can I say? I was looking over here for the multifunction keys, but I don't have anything else to add compared with what you see on this sheet of paper, on the actual cover of it. I think it looks nice. I don't have any complaints about it. It also mentions that it supports PlayStation 3, Xbox, so it may be compatible also with some game consoles, and I think this is quite nice. Yes, in general, I don't have very many complaints about it. As I said, it's quite a good keyboard. It could have been slightly better if instead of using rubberized keys, it would have been using plastic keys, solid plastic keys. I think they have an even better feel, although I have to say that the metal dome construction that stands below these keys is very nice. So I would think that using the same metal dome keys and then putting on top plastic keys would offer the best tactile feedback. But I don't have too much to complain, especially when considering the price of such a keyboard, because it's far from being a top-end model. And of course, it also comes with your typical USB-A to micro USB cable. The cable, I have to say that it's quite thin. It doesn't have quite a nice feel to it, but I think it can survive a bit of use. So I'm expecting the keyboard not to fail until it reaches probably the age of some years. And this is your typical manual. I think it's descriptive enough in its function. Don't expect too much, because ultimately it's a cheap no name from my point. We're not talking about Logitech, we are not talking about other major manufacturers, so it's not really a keyboard that has a very high standing. You can also see the name being mentioned as different from the keyboard model I previously presented, but I don't see that an issue. It's quite common with Chinese manufacturers, because they have multiple names for the same basic architecture. I don't see it as something overly problematic or unpleasant. It's just that it's your typical keyboard that doesn't have any other special features. The keyboard dimensions, yes, they are presented over here. 15 centimeters with around 6 centimeters, so 15 centimeters long, 6 centimeters wide, and with a width of around 1.2, 1.3 centimeters. So it's not a thin keyboard by any stretch of the imagination, but I don't think it's bad. I think it has a very good balance of usability. It's not overly thin, it's not overly thick. You also notice the part that is mentioned in Spanish, and this just about concludes the manual you're having over here. Probably in another country there would be a different manual supplied with different languages, but I don't see that as a problem. In general, with very few exceptions, I think it's enough to have your keyboard up and running without even opening the manual. So I think this is not a problem, and you have quite a nice keyboard cover. It's not your typical cheap transparent plastic that is quite tough. It's quite a flexible plastic that holds very well in time. Of course, it was not opened perhaps as nicely as it should have been, but I think it has managed to survive very well a long-term use. So if you are interested, I can tell that I have been using this keyboard for I think around 3 or 4 years at this point. So I really think it was a very good purchase, and if you are going to find this model, I seriously recommend it to you. So that just about wraps up my current video. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you like, please subscribe to the channel. Thank you very much.